Hi everyone, first of all, wish you a very happy new year 2023. No matter where you are in the world, I hope you are doing great and my best wishes for you. So, the question in everyone's mind today is there going to be a fourth wave of COVID 19 in India and elsewhere in the world? As you know, I have just completed 6 months of my book, or a little more than 6 months of my book, A Disrupted World. One of the subtitles of my book was quite self-explanatory in many ways, and the subtitle was "A Mysterious Virus Assaulted Humanity and a Never-Ending Pandemic," and the tagline was, "Can we ever win this war?" At one point of time, actually, I had really thought that the world was on the verge of coming out of this pandemic, and we are almost on the war against the pandemic. The year 2022 was a reasonably good year. You know, we had so many landmark events in the year. We had two World Cups, one in cricket and in World Cup. The entire world is still rejoicing Messi's victory in FIFA 2022 actually. So that's an amazingly incredible thing, that the world was getting back to normalcy and getting back on its feet, which was something unbelievable in the year 2020 and in the year 2021. Yet there is one big question in everyone's mind that is coming out of the recent surge in exponential rise in infections from China. So what is that that's keeping us worried? What is that is there in everyone's mind? So we need to ask ourselves, how much of it is fear, how much of it is hype, and how much of it is substance? We need to try to understand the real possibilities. We need to decode the various possibilities one by one. First of all, how bad is the situation in China? You know, overwhelmed hospitals, strained crematoriums, hospitals running out of beds, hospitals running out of ICUs, hospitals running out of medical supplies, and people resting outside the hospital on ambulances or on their taxis or their cars with oxygen cylinders. All these things were reminiscent of India's second wave against COVID-19, and in many other parts of the world in earlier days of the COVID-19, something that is entirely unthinkable in the year 2023. These things are increasingly being seen in China these days. And this has come because the Chinese Communist Party or the Chinese government has lifted the zero COVID policy or restrictions related to the zero COVID policy. Now, what was zero COVID policy? I think you all know what is zero COVID policy. Zero COVID policy is something where even with this even when there was a single case of COVID-19 in an entire province, or a few cases of COVID-19 in an entire province, the Chinese government would shut down the entire city, shut down the entire province, or provinces are like states and cities. You know, most Chinese cities are hugely populated cities, and this was something the Chinese thought that they can win over the virus, even when despite a reasonably good medical infrastructure, their population was, I will come to it when I dissect the causes. So this was the reason why, and people were entirely distressed, and the administration at one point of time felt that it could no longer hold an entire population in a lockdown for an eternal period of time. So they had to lift the restrictions, and they had to finally succumb to people's demands. But this happened so suddenly. Even the administration, I don't know what they were thinking. One of the experts points out that probably the administration thought that let those who get infected, let those who die would die, so that we will soon reach a peak and we'll come out of it and we'll resume the normalcy once again. This is a hard lesson the rest of the world thought in course of time. They had several waves of the pandemic, after which the world had to learn this lesson. They had to undergo the pandemic, multiple peaks of the pandemic, several people were dead, but Chinese are actually changing it. They are trying to shortcut the entire process and get over there quickly. Despite having a enormous, and despite having enormous structure of, and despite being a police state, the Chinese were unable to vaccinate their entire population. They were unable to vaccinate their elderly. The Chinese vaccines are not at par with the Western countries, something they are not willing to admit, and at the same time they're not accepting Western vaccines, and most importantly a lack of herd immunity, and even more important is the lack of hybrid immunity. Now, what is hybrid immunity? Hybrid immunity is a state where a person develops an immunity from a state of natural infection and from a state of vaccination. All those from India, we have been infected with COVID-19 many times, we have been vaccinated. So a combined state of immunity is there within us, one from the vaccine and one from the infection from the virus. So this is something which is very important in our fight against COVID-19, and this is something lacking in China. So this could be a possible factor why Chinese is lagging behind and why there is an exponential rise in cases. In fact, one of the economists, Eric Fagelding, he says that there could be a possibility in the next 3 months there will be more than 60% of Chinese population will be affected, and more than 10% of the entire world's population that will be affected by this virus. And this is an incredibly humongous number, and I don't think this is something that can be easily discounted for. But here comes the next question. This unpleasant scenario, does it really pose a huge risk for the world? The rest of the world I'm talking about. The point is that whenever there is a virus that circulates in huge numbers, in large numbers, there is always a chance that new mutants can arise. We are well versed with how the COVID-19 virus behaves by now. A little well versed actually. We should not claim that we know a lot about the virus. Till now, in one of the things that I have mentioned in my book, and I want to reiterate it again, there are more unknowns about the virus than actually we know about the virus. There are more unknown unknowns than known knowns about this virus. Yet one thing is very apparent, that the virus hasn't lost its ability to surprise us or shock us. The virus can develop into incredibly dangerous mutants, newer avatars of the variants or subvariants of the virus that would be totally resistant to the existing immunity, no matter what kind of immunity we have developed. So in that case, we will be going back to where we all started, and that is a scenario no country in the world, no population in the world would like to have. So incredibly dangerous mutants is something the entire world is afraid of. Even the experts all over the world, experts of epidemiologists, economists, and people who basically deal with virologists and gene experts, they're all worried about this particular consequence or probable consequence that can arise out of a exponentially huge number of cases in China. And the world is so interconnected that nothing remains confined to one part of the world, and everything is so interconnected. Finally, being an Indian, it's our important question all over the world. Indians, they are there all over the world, and India is a hugely populated nation. We have 1.4 billion population. Very soon we are going to be the most populated country in the world. So we have to be very careful about what global things can impact us. So anything that happens anywhere in the world, we can be impacted by it. So how bad is the prediction for India? So interesting thing is that, should we be worried? If I ask myself, yes, we should not be worried, but we should be concerned. A little bit of worry is good, because a little bit of worry always prevents a sense of complacency and puts us in a state of maximum alert. That is what we all must do. We shouldn't worry, but we should be in a state of maximum alert, and we should be conscious, we should be cautious, and we should be concerned. So talking about India and the scenario in India, what are the subvariants that are causing a surge in China? These are the the XBB variant and the BF7 variant. The BF7 variant is actually a BA5 variant of Omicron, and these variants have been there in India for quite some time. They haven't been able to cause a lot of disturbance or a lot of they haven't been able to disturb the local dynamics, and the cases in India till the last weeks of December and even the early weeks of January have been still within hundreds. So I think that's something, a good thing, and not something to worry about a lot. And another good thing is that, as I was looking at the figures, by the first week of January, more than 220 crore population of our nation, that's more than 2.2 billion of Indians, have been vaccinated, and more than 22 crore precaution doses have been given. And that's an incredibly remarkable numbers, thinking about the fact that we had our indigenous vaccines and we started vaccination in January 16, 2021. And another thing important, for the sake of record, I want to mention we have 9 vaccines in India against COVID-19. Covaxin and Covishield were the initial vaccines. Then we had the Sputnik from Russia, which was approved for an Indian manufacturer, and subsequently we had other group of vaccines that were added. I want to mention here that Zycov-D is a DNA vaccine, and that's the first DNA vaccine. Thankfully, India was able to manufacture the first DNA vaccine against COVID-19. Then there were other, just to name a few, there were Covivax vaccine, Covavax vaccine, Sputnik Light, Biological E vaccine, and the latest vaccine is the nasal vaccine. That's from Bharat Biotech, and that has been named as Incovac, and in other words, technically it is intranasal vaccine BBV154. So with all these vaccines, we are far better placed, and not only our wishful thinking, but even scientific texts have supported us. One of the leading journals, Lancet, has suggested that because of the vaccination from December 2020 to December 2021, because of this large number of vaccine, we have been able to prevent a significantly huge number of deaths all over the nation, and that is something we should be very proud of, and that is something which puts us in a much safer condition, or at least as safe as any advanced nation in the world. So what we should be doing? We shouldn't be worried. We should be concerned. We should focus on booster doses, and there should be airport screening, as our experts and our governments and our think tank is already doing. And more importantly, genomic surveillance. Genomic surveillance is something that you can know. That's something. An old adage in English goes as a stitch in time saves 9. So if you can identify a dangerous mutant well in advance, then we may give a widespread directive or instruction amongst the population to be cautious. So the Indian SARS-CoV-2 Genomic Consortium is an entire organization or a group of people, the INSACOG. They are doing an incredibly good job. And last but not the least, at our level, let's be a little more alert. We cannot go back to the usual COVID appropriate behavior of social distancing and a lot of other things. That's no longer possible, but I think we can all wear masks as often as possible. So with all this guidelines and the present scenario, as I have discussed, I think we are far better placed than we were ever before. But let's not be very complacent. Let's be a little more careful. It's only a few days. I think 2023 would be a great year for us. I wish you once again a very happy and prosperous new year, and of course hopefully a pandemic free 2023 in the coming days. Thank you. Take care.